started off running prep and then running everything and now doing everything in these strange times and doing an outstanding job as he has since he arrived here. And he is Rod Walker of The Advocate, the Times-Picayune, NOLA.com. Rod, listen, we appreciate the time tonight, and I'm glad you have time to join us. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Ken. I know we tried the other night, and the SWAC news was breaking right around the time we were supposed to air and was busy with that. But, yeah, I appreciate, whenever you have me on, so thanks.
Well, might as well start there since you mentioned it. Look, it looks like they're going to be able to try to play the game here in the Mercedes-Benz Superdome in March, which I thought was going to be virtually impossible because, A, the turf will have been pulled up already, and B, because of the ongoing renovations to the building. But the fact that they are still at least intending to play the game in New Orleans, that's a huge plus.
It is, Ken. I had the same concerns that you just mentioned. That the Dome will be going into the second phase of their renovations, once the Saints end this season. And so, yeah, just the fact that even thinking they can still pull this off in the Dome is admirable on their part. I still don't know if they'll be able to, get this done in the spring. But, I mean, the fact they're trying to do it and have a plan is, it speaks well for the SWAC. And, actually, I think the SWAC they seem to be a little, when it came to planning, I think they had some ideas and, they considered just postponing until October. And that was like one of the plans that they had considered. And then they ended up coming up with this one. But it looks like they're in, I guess, good shape as far as what they have out there on the table. They're talking about playing 6 conference games, and if teams want to, they can play a 7th non-conference game. So, I mean, they have a plan in place, and, we all want to see football come back, so let's hope they're able to get that done. I mean, SWAC football is really, really big for these HBCUs, and obviously a big revenue generator for those schools, and it's just so much tradition associated with that. So you hope they're able to get something done this season.
Visiting with Rod Walker of the Times-Picayune, NOLA.com. And, of course, I alluded to the fact that Eddie Bonine put out a letter today and basically said that the LHS AAA has no intention of canceling fall sports unless other factors dictate it. Look, we all know it's best case, it's hope for, maybe even posturing to a degree. But I've been very receptive and positive to what the LHS AAA has done with this entire scenario. Kick the can down the road as far as you can before you actually have to say, okay, this is what we're doing. I think that's the right approach. And here's why. Because these kids are working out in pods of 25 to a group. They're getting ready as if the season is going to take place on time. So it's not as though any timetable has to change prior to. If you have to push it back 2 weeks, if you have to push it back a month, or God forbid, if you have to push it back to the spring, you still have that option. You don't have to make that decision yet. The governor will make another announcement in 2 weeks. Just wait as long as you can. Do you agree?
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I know some states have already, pulled the plug on things. I think California is one of the ones that has, and then there's some states that haven't. There's some states that are trying to start right on time. But I think the LHSAA, even Mississippi, which is where I'm from, they pushed theirs back 2 weeks, I guess. So I mean, I think the LHSA is doing probably the best. I think they're handling it better than anybody. I mean, they're just sort of, they haven't made any big decisions yet, but they're just kind of waiting to see how things play out. They're working with the just kind of waiting to see what the governor says as far as the state opening back up. I mean, we're still in phase 2 right now, but the LHSA is not rushing to any decisions, which I think is the right way to handle this right now. And you just see what happens, and if it happens where they can't play, then they just can't play. But yeah, there's no reason to make those decisions, this soon. I mean, we're still in July, and obviously you got to see what some of these schools are going to do as well. But yeah, I think they're handling this the right way. And you look at the LHSA, they take a lot of criticism for decisions they make, and that comes with the territory of being who Eddie Bonine is. I mean, that's a position that you're going to get criticized a lot, but I think he does deserve some credit for him and his association. I mean, they deserve some credit for the way they're handling this so far.
The Nets and the Pelicans, as I mentioned earlier, Rod, are playing this evening. And it's 56-35 at the half. Pelicans are all over the Nets. And Nets, of course, I don't want to use the word decimated, but they're not the same team with some of the guys they don't have. Of course, the Pelicans don't have Zion Williamson, but it's been a pretty impressive first half. Brandon Ingram with 12 points, picking up where he left off. Etuan Moore had himself a big half as well. And, look, I mean, this team, the Pelicans, they had to play, 45 games without Zion Williamson? This is nothing new to them. They, in fact, were more accustomed to this than having him, right?
Yeah, I mean, we only saw Zion for 18, 19 games. And so, yeah, I mean, this is a team that, they should be fine without him. I mean, obviously they're better with him, but you look at they played really well in the first half of this scrimmage tonight, especially considering this long layoff. I mean, they only turned the ball over 3 times in the first half, so they, are not really being sloppy as you typically see teams with that kind of a layoff. And that's just a testament to these guys. And to me, it seems like this team wants to be there. Just kind of talking to them leading up to this, a lot of those guys talked about, wanting to go there and take care of business, and they want to make the playoffs. They're not just trying to go down there and play these 8 games and come back home. I think they really want to be there, and they really want to, show what we got a chance to see the second half of the season and show that they're not that team that had that 13-game, losing streak back in November, December. So this is a team that I think this is a dangerous team down there, actually. If they can get that 8th seed, I think it's a team that, they play the Lakers, I assume, in the first round. And the Lakers don't have a home court advantage in the bubble. I mean, everybody's, you're on equal footing, and I think that bodes well for the Pelicans. And I don't know if they're good enough to beat them, but, I mean, I think they could, push them to 6 games. And, if you can push a 1 seed to 6 games in the first round of the playoffs, I mean, I think that's saying how good your team is. So I'm really curious to see how this all shakes out.
I think they're in a good place as well. I've liked their chances from day one when this was announced. They're young, they're hungry, they're getting better. They have veterans who are really good influences aside from being solid players. It's a good mix. And the other thing about it is, given the minute restrictions in all likelihood, starting off because of the short training ability and being off for so long, that might benefit the Pelicans as well, because when I look at their roster, 1 through 12, they're as deep as virtually anybody in the league. It might not be the best team or the best roster in the league, but when you're talking about Ball and Hart and Hayes and Holiday and Melly and Alexander Walker and Favors and Ingram and Jackson and Moore and Reddick, and not even counting Zion, that's 12 guys. And when you add Zion, that's 13 guys, all of whom can play in this league. Most of them are proven. The others are talented young players. This is a deep team.
Yeah, I agree with you, Ken. And I mean, this isn't a team where you see one of those guys come out on the court and you say, "Oh man, now he's out there." They don't have that kind of player on this team. I mean, everybody contributes. I think everybody knows their role, and this team is just, and they've gotten better. From the beginning of the season. To me, it's night and day from what we saw at the beginning of the season. I mean, that's just because you had guys like Brandon Ingram and Lonzo Ball who were still trying to sort of find their way. I mean, they were new to this squad, but you look at this team, I agree with you there. I think they're one of the better, most talented teams in the league as far as a roster, as far as top to bottom. And I think even with the starting 5, I think that starting 5 with, and this is with Zion back, but I think when you have Zion, Favors, Drew Holiday, Brandon Ingram, and Lonzo Ball, I think that's one of your better starting 5s in the league. Not really any superstars, but some guys who are right there, and I just think it's a really good, solid team all the way around.
The bubble situation in Orlando at this point certainly looks like it was a good concept, and it looks like it's going over quite well. When you have had 0 positive tests since July 13th, that's eye-opening. That's pretty impressive. Even prior to then, they had very few, and it just tells me that, yes, this can be done. But what's really going to be interesting is MLB starting tomorrow, because they've got nothing like this. They're playing at all these home facilities, and there is no bubble. The only one not playing at home is the Blue Jays, who are playing in Pittsburgh. But everybody else is playing their games, and they're going home. And my thought process is simple. The NBA has proven that you can do this and do it right in that kind of scenario. But if you can do it in an open situation and have very few people impacted, I think that's going to pave the way for college athletics. I think they're going to see this, and I think it's going to encourage them to proceed, especially the Power 5 conferences not named the Pac-12.
Yeah, I agree with you on that as well. I think, and obviously baseball has some advantages just because it's not nearly as much contact as football will have. But yeah, I mean, what the NBA has done, they've sort of set the precedent for everybody. Everybody sees that this can be done. They see that if you take the right measures, that you can keep these guys safe. And I'm hoping that they can keep that going on through October. I mean, because it could take one or two guys to test positive, and it could obviously cause some issues. But right now, they've shown that this can be done, and you want to see baseball do it too. And I think the more we get into this and the more we learn about it, I think we're going to get better at it, and hopefully that bodes well for football, because again, we all want to have a college football season. It's important to society, I guess, and I mean, just for what you and I do for a living, Ken. I mean, we kind of football sort of that's what we kind of count on. So we want to see it, and we want to see the leagues do everything they can to make it happen.
I honestly believe that if this works, in the baseball aspect, you nailed it. It's not so much close contact, and that's why we've seen Korea do this so successfully. And, I mean, if you're like me and you're an insomniac and don't sleep, you're up at 3:30 in the morning watching Korean baseball for the last month and a half, 2 months, and they've had no issues whatsoever. Of course, no fans in the stands, but no issues at all on the field. So I think the sport does lend itself much better to safety. Basketball, you got a lot of close contact. Football, obviously, a different dynamic altogether. Where the Saints are concerned, it's clear now that the Players Association and the NFL have pretty much come to agreement on everything in terms of how things should operate and what to do. And part of it was pressure from the Players Union, and it seems to have worked to a degree. And it looks like things are going to start on time next week. I don't know what's going to happen. Every team seems to have a different policy right now. The Saints haven't announced theirs, but we see some that have talked about having 10 to 20,000 people in the stands. Some like, New Jersey, where the Giants and Jets play, saying nobody until further notice. The California's very, very limited, as we've already seen. The Raiders, Mark Davis talking about not having fans at all. So it looks like to me this is just a mixed bag. It's an individual scenario based upon what's going to happen. But I do think there's going to be a season, and I do think it's going to happen on time. Your thoughts?
Yeah, and the league came out today, they said, even if fans are there, they're going to be required to wear masks into the stadium. So, I mean, just the fact that the league is saying that lets you know that, I think they are thinking that they're going to be able to pull this off. And, I got a chance to talk to J.C. Tretter, who's the president. He's actually the center of the Cleveland Browns, but he's also the president of the Players Association. We had a conference call with him on Friday. And, it was he didn't sound really happy at the time about just some of the things that the league had sort of decided they were going to have. And he, they had the players had some issues, and they want those issues resolved. And this was on Friday. And, by the time, Sunday rolled around, the league and the players had sort of come to an agreement. And, the daily testing was one of the big things that the players wanted, and they were able to get that. The players at the time, the league had already cut it from 4 to 2 preseason games, and the players were at the time when we talked to JC on Friday, he was wanting 1 preseason game, and now they've gotten rid of all the preseason games. So, I commend the league for listening to the players and making them feel safe, because if the players aren't safe and they don't want to be there, I mean, the thing can really go downhill. So, and I'm not one to think the players should just get whatever they want, but in this case, they want to be safe and they want to feel protected, and the league did that. So that should make the players happy enough to get them into training camp, and I mean, that's where it all starts. So I mean, you want to see that happen, and I think that's going to happen here next week.
I do too, and I think it's going to take place. I don't know what it's going to look like, what it's going to feel like, and if there will be ramifications. There's going to be consistent testing. We saw the regulations. If they have under 5%, they'll relax it to every other day eventually, but initially it'll be every day, and that's as it should be. And as for fans, look, I'm sure you're getting the questions too. I've been getting them every day. I don't have an answer for them. The mask is obvious. That came today. So that we understand that completely, and that's as it should be, frankly. Now, I had one text and one email today asking me the question, well, what about the concession stands? What happens when we go get a drink or go get something to eat? Can we then go back to our seat and drink and eat with obviously not having the mask on? I can't answer that. I don't know the answer to that question. And the questions are just going to keep coming, and they're good questions. But these are questions we just can't answer them all right now.
Yeah, I mean, we can't. I know the Miami Dolphins, they had a plan. And they may have actually been the first team to come out with a plan. And I know one of their things at the stadium was they're going to, I think I can't remember if each section you basically can't just go to the concession stand when you want to. I mean, there's almost like a designated time when you can go. And I think and that would keep the lines down. And obviously they had a plan where it's only 10,000, 13,000 fans anyway, so it'd be a smaller crowd. But I think these are a lot of little issues that everybody's going to have to work out. And, that's something that we haven't heard what the Saints' plan is other than all the teams in the league. You can't have the people on the first 8 rows of the stadium. But other than that, I mean, we don't know what the Saints' plan is right now and how many people are going to be allowed into the dome and what the process will be like as far as, I guess, determining who those people will be. But, there are a lot of questions out there that are unanswered, and, hopefully we can get them figured out here before September, because, I mean, it's just – it could be a logistical nightmare if you don't have all the – you have to think about every possible scenario. I mean, it's just part of planning, and New Orleans has always been a city I thought, that does really well when it comes to planning and organizing events, and even under tough circumstances. So I think they'll get it all figured out, and eventually we'll know what that plan is.
Yeah, it's interesting because I talked to Mickey Loomis earlier today about some other business, and of course, I run the Saints Hall of Fame, among other things, and we were talking about a few things. And, of course, they're under siege because they're basically dealing with as many as like 7 or 8 different scenarios. And it's a matter of A, B, C, D, E, F, or G. Where do you go? And right now they're considering every one of those options, and they haven't made up their minds. And, of course, they're feverishly trying to prepare for training camp with all these restrictions and all these things in place to keep these guys safe. So he said it's kind of a madhouse right now, and that's understandable.
Yeah, I can imagine. I remember talking to, I think I was talking to Troy Dannon, I guess this was months ago, 2 or 3 months ago. He was saying the same thing about how you're having to deal with every possible scenario. I mean, you just don't know, and you have to say, okay, if this happens, we're going to do this. If it's pushed back to here, we're going to do this. So, I mean, I can't even imagine being in those guys' shoes, having to just be trying to prepare for this. I mean, it's hard enough for them to prepare for a regular season anyway, and now you have to do it with all these different scenarios. I mean, that's sort of mind-boggling, and we'll have to commend them, if and when we're able to pull this off, because they'll deserve a lot of credit for making this thing run smooth.
No doubt. Just a couple more questions for Rod Walker before we let him get away. With regard to the NFL policies that are in place, the 80-man roster, and, of course, no preseason, for a veteran team and for a contending team like the Saints, that's going to make it nearly, not totally, but nearly impossible for an undrafted free agent to make this roster. I mean, you have so far fewer opportunities with no offseason, now with no preseason games, and with the limitation of the roster initially, it's going to be really difficult for players outside of the realm, like we've seen for years with this team, the Pierre Thomases, the Lance Moores, the Willie Sneads. I mean, there have been so many of those guys, but this year, I got to believe, is going to be an exception to that.
Yeah, man, you can go back to last year. I mean, look at a guy like Deontay Harris. I mean, he probably doesn't make this roster if he's this year. I mean, this is a guy who ended up being an All-Pro and a Pro Bowler who wouldn't have made an NFL roster if last year was this year. So, yeah, it's tough. You kind of feel for those younger guys who. I mean, there are going to be some guys who are going to slip through the cracks, and, you hope they get a shot, next year, but they're going to really have to be, just in such a short amount of time. I mean, they'll have to be, pretty impressive from the first day of practice. I mean, they just can't have they have to pick up on the offense or defense, like, right away, and they just don't have the learning curve that most rookies get at this, at this stage of their career. And, hopefully some of those guys can at least get on the practice squad and maybe be able to prove themselves. But again, I mean, you mentioned this Saints roster. This Saints roster is going to be hard to make regardless. So now you're adding this to it. I mean, this Saints roster may not look a whole lot different than what we saw last year. I mean, I just can't see a lot of guys making this team anyway. And
no.
with the limited amount of time they'll get to impress, I mean, it's going to be tough for anybody.
Yeah, one defensive lineman maybe, and of course the draft picks definitely, and beyond that, Emmanuel Sanders, and I mean there's not much there to look at in terms of change for sure. And finally, with regard to the preseason, of course, I've seen all the reaction on social media. Fans are like, hooray, amen, and fantastic. Of course, none of them like paying the full price for the preseason games that they are forced to pay with their season ticket packages. Do you think this is a trend and something that will continue moving forward, that if not the elimination of the preseason, at least a definitive reduction as has been proposed by the owners previously?
Yeah, I think we'll definitely. I mean, I think the days of 4 preseason games is probably over with, and I think next year they were going to 3 anyway. They were cutting it to 3 and adding that 17th game anyway. So, I mean, and that's next year. And I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if it cuts down to 2 games at least. I mean, I don't know if 4 preseason games is. And again, I mean, for those rookies, I mean, other than those guys trying to make the rosters, I mean, as far as the fans, I don't think fans care about preseason at all, other than it gives you some football before the real football starts. But yeah, I think this year is going to cut it to 0 this year, and that's assuming that they don't have a lot of injuries or something in week 1 or week 2, and they say, okay, maybe we do need to give these players more of an acclimation period. But assuming that doesn't happen, I think they cut the preseason down. I don't see why you keep 4 games. I mean, I just think coaches have to just do a better job of evaluating players in camp and just having to trust what they see in camp and not worrying about what these players do when the lights come on. So I definitely think we'll end up going to 2 games instead of 4 in the future.
Read the Times-Picayune New Orleans Advocate. Go to NOLA.com and follow him on Twitter at Rod Walker NOLA. Does an outstanding job in all capacities, and he's been pressed into overtime duty with this pandemic and the unfortunate situation surrounding many people in our industry who are not working right now. And friends of yours, friends of mine, colleagues, it's tough. It's been not fun at all, and it's not just idle chatter when I say my thoughts and prayers are with them, because as I texted you the other day, we're fortunate. We're still working, and that's certainly not the case for a lot of people we know and care about.
Yep. Hope everybody hope we can get sports going and get everybody back on board. I mean, that's my wish, and I know it's yours too. So.
Absolutely. Class act. Rod Walker, thank you.
Right.
Appreciate
Thanks,
the
man.
visit. Keep up the great work here.
Bye.
All right, Rod.
All right,
thank you.
you.